All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Syracuse University. We do have a number of you joining us this evening from all across the United States, so I'm going to give it a minute just so everyone can get in and get comfortable. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world, to spend some time with us talking about financial aid. Again, really glad everyone could join us this evening and learn some more about the financial aid process. I know there are a lot of questions when it comes to financial aid, so welcome. Get comfortable with the Zoom features. We will be using a number of the features here. So again, welcome everyone. Again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to spend with us here at Syracuse University talking about financial aid. Glad to have everyone here this evening. I would like to welcome everyone. This is Financial Aid 101 Financial Aid Workshop. My name is Jessica Calhoun. I'm an assistant director here at Syracuse University in the Office of Admissions. In a former life, I was a financial aid counselor here at Syracuse University, but luckily we have the expert on all things financial aid when it comes to Syracuse University, Casey Woods. So Casey, you're going to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Casey. I'm the Associate Director of Financial Aid. I manage all the financial aid counselors. So anytime you call or come in to work at the financial aid office, the counselors that you would work with are the group that I manage. I've been here for about 3 years, and I count it by winters. It's my third winter, and they've all been beautiful and great. And I'm looking forward to this next upcoming one.
So Casey and I have much in common. We're both California people that have made the jump from California over to Syracuse. Again, really glad that everyone could join us this evening. Just a little bit about the Zoom features. We will have the Q&A open. So if you do have questions, my wonderful colleagues, Mike and Kate, will be in the background answering questions. We will also answer questions live at the end of the session. One thing about the Q&A, we highly recommend that you do not put any personal information in the Q&A. If you have those kind of questions, those are questions that you would want to direct to your financial aid counselor specifically. So want to make sure that we're not divulging any personal information in the Q&A. But again, if you have questions, please utilize that feature. We will also be utilizing the chat feature. So again, my colleagues, Mike and Kate, will be back behind the scenes, dropping important links into the chat. So those are important links that you will want to use. So again, happy to have everyone here this evening. Let's kick it off. Casey, can you move forward one slide for me, please? So this is,
so you want to,
yeah, this is our Syracuse University campus. For those of you that haven't had a chance to visit our campus, we do have a beautiful campus here in Syracuse. So hopefully everyone gets a chance to come and visit us while we're on campus. This is our agenda for the evening. We are going to go over the merit-based scholarship process, the financial aid application process, cost of attendance and the expected family contribution, or the EFC, the various types of financial aid. We are also going to go over some very specific processes involving tuition exchange and the Yellow Ribbon program and the New York State TAP application. So this is kind of what we're going to be going over this evening. Again, if you have questions and things like that, please feel free to utilize that Q&A section. A little bit about Syracuse University. We are a private institution. We get a lot of questions about what is in-state versus out-of-state tuition. Because we are a private institution, we do not differentiate between in-state and out-of-state. So all of our students pay the same amount of tuition, whether they are coming from a mile away from campus or 3,000 miles away from campus. But that means we have a very robust amount of aid that we are able to give our students to make Syracuse University affordable. We have a commitment to making the university affordable, and that comes in a variety of different formats. And about 80% of our students are receiving some type of financial support, whether that's scholarships, whether it's grants, whether it's loans, work study. And that's totaling more than over $400 million. So there is a lot of funding to be had. And again, this whole Financial Aid 101 is to talk about all of the different ways that you can make Syracuse University affordable. And of that $400 million, almost $300 million of it is in the forms of grants and scholarships. So that is gift aid. That is money that does not have to be repaid. And again, we have that commitment to affordability for all students at Syracuse. And so a little bit about the scholarship process. So myself in the Office of Admissions, we are reviewing the admissions application. We are a common application school. That is the one and only application that you need to apply for admission to the university. And when you're applying for admission to the university, that is also your application for all of our merit-based scholarship funding. And so there is not a separate application for that academic merit. We are looking very holistically at your application through the common application, including your GPA and test scores, your extracurricular activities, your letters of recommendation. If you're applying to any of our talent-based programs, we're also looking at your auditions or your portfolios, and all of that information goes into the review for our merit-based scholarship funding. And again, there is no separate application for that academic merit. We consider all students that apply for those merit-based scholarship funding. And that merit-based scholarship funding can range from a few $1,000s to full tuition, obviously with the full tuition scholarship being the most competitive of that process. And again, we don't draw a line in the sand when it comes to GPA or test scores. We're looking very holistically throughout that process. So if you're applying to, say, our School of Music in the Centner School of Music, we are looking at your audition. That's very different than what we're looking at for students that are applying for our College of Engineering and Computer Science. And so that's a little bit about the merit-based scholarship process. When you get your admissions letter from Syracuse University, that will have your admission and also will have your merit-based scholarship offer right there within that admissions letter. And then once you're a student here at Syracuse University, there is a renewal process for this, or there's not a specific renewal process, but there are some criteria to make sure that you're maintaining eligibility for those scholarships. The renewal process, you have to maintain a 2.75 GPA, and you have to maintain full-time enrollment at Syracuse University. So that is at least 12 credits. Most students are taking up to 15 credits, but you do need to be a full-time student to maintain eligibility for your scholarships. Another way that Syracuse makes the cost of education affordable, and our students are doing a lot when it comes to outside scholarships. And we've had students that have paid full tuition and fees, all coming from outside scholarship funding. So those are from private donors, everyone from the Gates Foundation. We've had the Sean Carter, or some people know him as Jay-Z, all different types of scholarships that students have brought in. And there's a variety of different resources for our students when it comes to outside scholarships. This is just a few of the resources here: FastWeb, College Board, finaid.org, scholarships.com. I just have a couple of points when it comes to applying for outside scholarships. First and foremost is that you should start applying early. If you're currently a senior in high school, this is the ideal time to start looking for those outside scholarships. And I also recommend connecting with your high school guidance counselor. So guidance counselors are a really great connection to some of the local scholarships that you might be eligible for. And then the last piece of advice I have for outside scholarships is do not pay money for outside scholarships. These are not things that you should be providing any personal, they should not be asking for social security numbers. They should not be asking for a $25 fee to apply for these scholarships. These all should be things that you can look for and apply for free. If you have questions about that, or would you like to be a part of our scholarship listserv, there is a listserv that you can actually get from Syracuse University that has some more information about outside scholarships, whether it's based on your major, cultural background, family history, anything like that. There's a lot of different scholarships to be had. So please, start that process, start looking around for those different options and those different scholarships. And so Casey, I'll have you go to the next slide. And I just want to say that just a reminder for the high school seniors here, and even for the juniors, is that we have specific admissions deadlines. We have an early decision deadline, which is November 15th. For current students this year, we are going to early decision 2. So that is a great opportunity. If you are interested in Syracuse is your #1 choice, and you didn't meet that November 15th deadline, we are opening up a second round of early decision, and the deadline for that application is January 1st. And we also have the regular decision deadline, which is January 1st as well. And Casey's going to talk about the FAFSA and the CSS profile and those deadlines and how they mirror our application deadlines.
Thanks, Jessica. So wow, I see 170 plus people in here. So I'm really happy that everyone's here and that we can go over some of these criteria and how to receive aid. I can't tell you enough how many times students don't attend these type of things and aren't aware of the different types of aid that's available to them and these deadlines, and may apply for them too late or do something too late in the process and maybe lose out on their eligibility. So just stick with us and try to pay attention the best you can, take notes, because this is probably one of the most important pieces of processes, one of the most important parts of the process for admission for college, whether it's Syracuse or other places, to make sure you go through the financial aid process and stick with it and complete everything that's required of you. So just to start, the FAFSA and the CSS profile are the two different applications for financial aid at Syracuse. A lot of schools that you may apply for may only have the FAFSA, and that's usually just for public schools. But as Jessica said, we're a private institution, so we have we also have our own method of determining financial aid and eligibility for financial aid. So we use something called the CSS profile, which is through the College Board, which also has the SAT and AP tests, but that has a lot of the same questions as the FAFSA, just a few other questions that are on there, such as home equity and some other points of reference that we use to determine our own eligibility. So these are the two most important applications that have a deadline, and they do mirror the applications for admission that Jessica went over. So early decision, hopefully if you apply for the decision, you would already have submitted a FAFSA and a CSS profile because they were due November 15th for early decision 1. And you want to, if you have not done that, please do that as soon as possible. And if you can do it this weekend, like tonight or tomorrow, as soon as you can for FAFSA and CSS profile to get those in. And then otherwise for early decision 2 and regular decision, those are due January 1st, along with your application for admission. Then I may ask for other documentation through the to-do list, which is located in your MySlice account, which you'll see financial aid to-do list is one of the boxes in there. And those don't necessarily have deadlines. So if you don't necessarily, if you don't see it for a while, those don't need to be in by November 15th or January 1st. However, the sooner you get those in, the faster we can get working on your financial aid to make sure you have a completed financial aid package with your admission decision if you are admitted. If you wait to submit those until after you find out if you're admitted and you try to rush and get everything in, it can delay your financial aid package, and you may not know what your financial aid looks like until after the May 1 deadline or your commitment deadline, which is really hard to compare Syracuse to other schools and what the actual costs are for each of those. So kind of talking about costs and how the financial aid process and what this need-based process looks like. There's these applications basically use a basic equation to come out with how much your family needs. And Syracuse is committed to providing 100% of your determined need based upon these the CSS profile. And then the FAFSA is what considers your eligibility for state and federal aid. So in order for us to do that, to determine what your family need is, because we need a way to figure out, to come up with that, because what your family may think they need may be a little bit different than what's on paper. So we have to kind of look and see what the family's income and assets are, and what the some other things such as how many people are in college, how big the family is, and a few other points to see exactly what the resources of the family are. So I'll kind of get into that when I get to the expected family contribution. But first, the cost of attendance. So in order for us to determine how much you need to afford to come to Syracuse, we need to, it starts out with how much it costs to go to Syracuse. And so this is a lot of times called the sticker price. And this isn't necessarily what everyone pays. This is the upfront. So that you see at the very bottom, the total cost of attendance, I'll go over the different components, is $77,896. And that sounds really, really high. But that's, again, the sticker price. And not everyone pays that. As we go through this need-based process, we determine how much your family actually can contribute, and then we provide a supplement amount to supplement and to make it so you can afford to come to Syracuse. So if you see this number and go, so whoa, that's way too much, I can never afford to go there, or for any other schools, just please make sure you go through the process, apply for admission, apply for financial aid, and then you actually were going to compare your financial aid packages on that actual remaining costs afterwards, after all financial aid is considered. So what the cost of attendance is made up of is pretty standard across different schools, but they're made up of two different types of costs, which is direct costs and indirect costs. So direct costs go directly to the university. So things like tuition, housing, and meals if you're living on campus and have a meal plan, mandatory fees, those are things you're paying directly to the university in your bill. So those are pretty set depending on your meal plan and housing plans. Those are things that don't really have room to budge. So the total direct costs is the majority of it, which is $74,486. This is this year's. This next year's cost of attendance has not been released yet, so we're using this year's as an example. And indirect costs, though, these things are a bit more subjective. It can depend on the person and the family and what these actually end up being. Because these are not ones that you necessarily pay to Syracuse in your bill. So books and supplies, those can vary depending if you buy books, new or used, if you need to buy a computer, if you rent your books, other supplies that you may have and how you purchase them, that can vary of how much you spend on books and supplies every year. Transportation can depend if you're bringing a car or if you're just going to bring a bike or use public transportation. Personal expenses obviously are going to vary from person to person on what you're spending throughout the year on yourself. So this, you really do want to take a look at that and see, do those numbers really match up? Maybe you want to look at a budget and see what you're really expecting. It could be under that what's expected, or it might be over, depending on what your personal preferences are and what you think you're going to want to do while you're in school. So just to take that into account, this is an estimated cost of attendance. And it's not going to be the same for any two people, but it is what we use in order to determine your financial aid, because we go by the averages on what an average student will spend while they're in school for each year. So the second part of the equation, like I said, is expected family contribution. This is where we determine how much your family can afford to pay towards school. So a lot of families can't afford that full $77,000 plus upfront. And we know that when this is a partnership between the school and the family to help the student go to school. And so in order to do that, we get the FAFSA from that CSS profile. And we look at, like I said, the income and assets of the family, number of students in college, family size, how old the parents are, and how close they are to retirement. There's a lot of different aspects that go into determining how much the family can afford. But basically, it comes up with a number. So for example, if that's $77,000, it may say that your family can afford $50,000. And that means where we're getting to this equation now, 77,000 minus expected family contribution, that means your need is $27,000. So you would need $27,000 in financial aid from Syracuse and other sources in order to afford to come to Syracuse. So when we're using that off the CSS profile, we're committed to providing a package that's $27,000. So how that package is made up is going to be from different sources of aid that I'll go into next, and types of financial aid. So once we determine how much you need in order to come to Syracuse, that aid can come from the federal government, the state government, from the college university, or private and outside other agencies. Well, our financial aid can come from those different sources. And I'll go into how we would kind of fill that $27,000 as we continue through that example. So those different sources of financial aid that you can receive aid from provide different types of financial aid. So federal governments can provide Pell Grants, SCOG. Universities can provide, we provide a Syracuse University grant. There's also state grants called, at New York, it's called TAP. So these different types of grants are all free money. This is money that you do not need to pay back. So you want as much grant in your financial aid package as possible, along with the scholarships that Jessica talked about, because those are both things you do not need to pay back at some point. So you want to see as much grant and scholarships in your package as possible, filling up whatever your need is. And then on top of that, there's other things that can help you fill the gap and the remaining need. And one of those is federal loans and also private loans. But federal loans include ones for the student, which start at $5,500 for first year students, 65, and then 7,500 for the third and fourth year students. And there's also loans that parents can take out, and also private loans that use a combination with the student and the parent. And then work study. Work study is basically making it easier for you to get a job on campus. The federal government helps pay part of the paycheck basically every time, but it is as a paycheck. So you get paid throughout the year for how many hours you work, and you get a job on campus, and say you work 10 hours a week, and you may make $150 in a week, and you get a paycheck, depending on the amount of hours you work and what your pay rate is. So it isn't something you get debited into your account at the beginning of the semester. So we're going back to that example of the $27,000 need. If your family's able to contribute $50,000 and you need $27,000, what we would do is we would fill it first with what you're eligible from the federal government and the state government. So if you are eligible for Pell Grant, SEOG, TAP, those would go in along with your student loans, which is $5,500. And then after that, if you received any merit-based scholarships from the university, that would be added as well. Then the remaining need would be the SU grant, the Syracuse University grant. Again, you don't need to pay back. Would fill the remaining up to the $27,000. Then after that, sorry, there's also the work studies part of that federal part at the beginning. So it's the Pell Grant, SEOG, the $5,500 in loans and work study, and then also any SU grant and scholarships up to that point. But anything after that, if you're receiving outside scholarships, we try to let you keep as much outside scholarship money as possible before we have to reduce any other aid. But there is a possibility that if you read so much outside scholarships, sometimes there's not enough room that we can't fit it in without reducing other aid, because there's just too much of it. And then if you receive the Parent Plus loans or private loans, those can go on top of everything as well to help fill the rest of the gap if needed. So that's kind of an example of how it would work. And obviously it varies from family to family. Two families are going to be the same and how much they can afford. And it really does depend on that income and assets and different metrics of the family to determine how much you need.
Casey, I just want to jump in real
Sure.
quick before you, because there was a question that came in. So I'm just going to, since you're talking about it. So do you mind just kind of going over the subsidized and unsubsidized? So one of the student loans that students would be eligible for is a need-based loan, while the other one is not.
Yep.
There was a question that kind of came in about that. So I figured since you were
Sure.
talking about it, great time to jump in for that.
Sure. So with that $5,500 for first year students in the student loans, there are two different types of loan. There's a subsidized direct loan and an unsubsidized direct loan. And the subsidized direct loan is if your family does have need as determined by FAFSA, and that is up to $3,500 for the first year. And the subsidized basically means that the government's subsidizing the interest while you're in school. So for loans, you do need to pay it back, and there is an interest rate they need to pay it back. So that means that it's not like you just pay it back dollar for dollar. It does go up with time as the interest accrues. But for the subsidized one, while you're in school, the interest does not accrue. So when you graduate, that $3,500 would still be $3,500. That's again for need-based though. And then there's still a $2,000 even for need-based students. There's still a $2,000 unsubsidized direct loan, and the unsubsidized loan would start accruing interest when the loan disperses. If you don't have any determined need from FAFSA, then you would just receive the full $5,500 in unsubsidized student loan. So that's kind of the difference between the two. So you definitely, if you are trying to decide if you want to take how much loan you want to take out, if you don't need the full amount, you want to take out that $3,500 subsidized loan first and use that up before you go into the unsubsidized loan portion. Okay. So during this process though, and this has gotten even more and more relevant, obviously, the past couple of years with COVID, lots of things can change. So FAFSA and CSS for this year is looking at income and just income information from 2020. It does ask for the assets was for the currently at this present time, but income information is looking at your family and your income from 2020, and a lot can change. Obviously with COVID, people lost jobs, people got new jobs. And so if there's been any changes where it's negatively, the income for the family has been negatively affected, whether that's loss of job, decrease in salary, loss of overtime, or death or serious illness in the family that there's been a loss of income from, you want to let us know as soon as possible. So there is an area on the CSS profile, but it's best to upload a letter to start the process into your MySlice to-do list. And I'll show you where the upload buttons for that is located in the next couple slides. But basically just write a letter and be as detailed as possible, letting us know what the situation is, what's affected the income. And then we do have an appeal form that will be added that will ask for some documentation so we can potentially use an updated income amount instead of using that 2020 income. That even includes for you as a student. So say maybe you made, maybe you had a little business while you're in high school and you made some money, and your income in 2020 might be something, but when you're going to college, you want to focus on studies. You don't have time maybe to work as much as you did while you were in high school and have that income. And so if that is affecting it, usually it's to be a pretty significant amount before making kind of a big difference, but sometimes it does happen. So even then you would want to let us know that you're not going to be working anymore. But that's only, again, if you made it's not if you were just working as a babysitter or mowing lawns or something. That's really if you were making some pretty good money and had a business going, and in high school you're like doing some entrepreneurial stuff or something like that. But for the most part, this is just for parents. And if there's any change in income, you really want to let us know as soon as possible. We can take that into account. And when your financial aid package comes out, we can try to update that as quickly as possible. So to kind of get an idea of all this, and there'll be a link in the chat for this, is the net price calculator can give you a general idea, rough estimate of what to expect for the financial aid. So this lets you put in the income and the asset information right now and give you a general idea of what the financial aid package may look like. It is very rough. If for some reason you miss something or don't put something in, obviously they'll have a large effect on what the financial aid package would look like, and may not be similar to what we end up with. But also this isn't as simple, the financial aid process is not as simple as just entering things in and pressing a button. We do take our time on every student. It takes about 30+ minutes once we have all the documents in place to really go through it, try to read through everything, look at the family situation, and try to really account for what the family situation is. So this is, again, a rough estimate, but it could be used just to, one, to see maybe what you can expect, but also if your family is even considering, is it worth it? Maybe we aren't eligible for aid. I'm not sure. We may make too much to be eligible for any financial aid. This is a good thing to use to see if it, if it's even worth going through the process. If you to receive need-based aid, if you think you're on that cusp. But otherwise, it's still a good way to just get a general idea of what to expect, but just know that it could be different depending on a lot of different factors. Just don't, we can go over that once the financial aid package has been completed and you have access to it. So the to-do list, this is something, again, once you've submitted, well, right now we'll show the FAFSA and the CSS profile. If you haven't done them, we'll show as required on here. But as things come up, like you see on this example, it has the parent W-2 forms. There's other documents that we may start asking for that you need to keep looking out for. So I would just recommend, like, once a week, just check all the different schools' financial aid portals that you're applying to, and just see, is there anything new that's come up that they may be asking for? Because it really does affect how quickly we could turn around and get your financial aid package out in time. If you let something sit on here for months and then submit it again, even if it is before your admission decision, but if it's just late to a point where we're not able to turn that around and get your financial aid package back to you quickly, it makes it really difficult. Like every year I get people who submit, say, that W-2 either say April 15th, and then are upset that we can't get them a financial aid package by May 1st. And we do our best to try to get everyone their financial aid package as quickly as possible, but you also need to make sure you're getting things in a timely manner. So we have time to get that to you. So really just make sure you're checking that. Again, other schools as well, just to make sure when you do get your financial aid package, all the schools, you have them all, and you can compare Syracuse to the other schools you got into and have it be apples to apples. You can say, okay, this is how much after financial aid this school's going to cost me. And then you can say, okay, what really can my family afford, and what fits my goals, and what fits what I'm looking for, and the type of school that's going to help me get to where I want to be. But you can't do that if you haven't submitted everything you need for financial aid. So really take your time, put a reminder in to check weekly what's needed in your financial aid portals. And then on here a little bit lower is there's just another link that's an upload button. It looks just like the links up here that are blue. It just or actually it's a little box that says upload here, and it takes you to this upload screen that you will have. The first part gets automatically inputted for you with your SUID and name, and then all you do is attach it. So if you have that W-2 for a parent, you would upload it here. You would submit the PDF of the parent's W-2, or if it's asking for student information, it may ask for a family member listing form, or if it's just simply uploading a letter of appeal saying that the income has changed, or there's been something that's negatively affected the family, it's affecting your family's ability to pay for college. This is where you'd want to let us know and upload it so we can be aware of it.
Casey, I just want to
Yep.
jump in if you don't mind. So there was a question that came in, and I'm gonna, as you're talking about the MySlice to-do list. So when you apply for, I'm just letting everybody know, when you apply for admission to Syracuse University, you will get access to something called your MySlice account. That will be your portal that has everything from your admissions to-do list, if we're requesting transcripts or letters of recommendation or anything missing from your admissions application, but that will also have your financial aid to-do list. So once you've submitted the Common App, you will get an email from us saying, we've received your application. Here is how you log in and how you access your MySlice account. And again, as Casey mentioned, making sure that you're staying on top of those to-do lists. Those are very important, both on the admission side and on the financial aid side. We want to get you your notification out in a timely manner and your financial aid notification out in a timely manner. So make sure that's our please, please, please keep on top of those to-do lists, but you will get access to that once you've submitted your application. Thanks, Casey.
Then I just want to touch again, just to kind of reiterate these deadlines, like you said, and the FAFSA and the CSS profile. I'm really getting on those now if you haven't already. January 1st is going to be here before you know it. Lots of things are happening right now in the next few weeks as you, I'm sure, finish up your semesters in high school and then go to holiday breaks and have family time, things like that. So really to take some time to try to do this as soon as possible. Don't let it wait till the last minute. It also includes your admission applications. Don't wait that to the last minute until December 31st. Now's the time to get on those things before they creep up on you. And then also other documents. And I do see a question over here just about some of the these documents and how long the documents take to process in MySlice. So when you do upload these, they'll go from, you'll see the different statuses here. So they go from required to partial. If you submit something and not everything has been completed that we need, it will go to partial. And then if it's received, that means we've currently received it. And then it will say completed if it's everything's done and we have everything that we need. But in terms of how long it takes, it really depends. At this time in the process, it could take multiple weeks because until there's an admission decision, like we're working through it, but it'll go from required, partial to received to completed. But we're not rushing to finish them and turn all of them around at a certain time. We're really trying to get everything in and stuff as possible. Then as we get closer, things may get moving, but regardless if you're admitted or not, we're working through all these and making sure that they get completed in a probably 2 to 3 weeks from the time you submit things. But in terms of the actual financial aid package, as long as you have everything in, like I said, probably at least 2 or 3 weeks before the admission decisions are set to come out, we try to get the financial aid packages back to you within a few days of your admission decision. So that's our goal. But if for some reason you're not submitting a document until really close, until kind of March, April timeline, where that financial aid package may come in a bit later. And then when you do the FAFSA, they'll ask you at the end of the FAFSA, it'll say, do you want to go to your state application and finish your state application for aid? And that's the easiest way to do it. It'll take you to HESC, which is the New York State, portal, the website to complete the TAP application. So if you're a New York State resident and looking at to go into New York State school, that's where you'd want to do that after you do the FAFSA. And it will automatically bring things over from FAFSA if you do that. If you decide not to do it right away, after a few days, then the information you put in FAFSA should load into HESC a few days later. And then it also has our TAP code here of 0985. And again, try to do that all at the same time as you do FAFSA and the CSS profile. And then real quickly, I just wanted to touch on tuition exchange. Tuition exchange is a benefit for families of students whose parents work at a school within the tuition exchange network. So if your parent works at a university, there's going to be a link in the chat, I think, as well, that shows all the different schools that work with tuition exchange and have it as a benefit. And this allows students whose parents that work at those universities, if they apply to Syracuse and get in, they receive a tuition exchange scholarship. So for next year, it's $40,000 and it goes up by $1,000 a year. And we accept all students who apply for tuition exchange, and who are admitted, receive the tuition exchange scholarship. We don't put a limit on the number of students who can receive this. Some other schools may only take 5, 10, 15 students. We take over 100, and it's no cap on it. So if you know your parent works at the university, take a look at the list for tuition exchange and see if your school is there. And if it is, work with your tuition exchange liaison at your parent school to submit an application that basically says that you're benefit eligible. And then if you're admitted, we'll add that scholarship to your financial aid award letter. And then Jessica's going to talk a little bit about GI funding.
Yeah, so also, as serving in the Office of Admissions, I'm also the admissions representative for all of our veteran, military, and military connected students. So we get a lot of questions about the GI Bill funding, whether you are a veteran looking to use the GI Bill, or you are a family member of a veteran or currently serving service member looking to use the post 9/11 GI Bill. So Syracuse University is a yellow ribbon school. So if you or your parent are going to be using the post 9/11 GI Bill and you're at that 100% tier, which means you've served more than 36 months on active duty, you are eligible for something called the yellow ribbon funding. Syracuse University is very lucky in that we do not have a cap on the number of yellow ribbon recipients that we have. Many schools have a cap. Sometimes they can only take 10 to 20 students, but that is not the case here at Syracuse University. So that will cover full tuition and fees between the post 9/11 GI Bill and the yellow ribbon funding, also with a stipend for books and also a monthly housing allowance. So excellent use of that post 9/11 GI Bill. Our Office of Veteran Success, they are our certifying officials. So they're the ones communicating directly with the Department of Veterans Affairs and making sure that you're getting all of that processed. Their email address is very easy if you have any questions specific to the post 9/11 GI Bill and the yellow ribbon funding. Their email address is just veterans@syr.edu. Amazing group of people in our Office of Veteran Success. And so again, if you have questions about that, please feel free to drop those into the chat or email our Office of Veteran Success for some more information there. And so I do just want to say that, I appreciate everybody taking the time out. We do have some questions here that we're going to answer live. So if you do have questions, please feel free to drop those into the Q&A. I will say if we get too many questions, we're not able to answer all of them. We will follow up with you via email. And so again, don't be too stressed out if we didn't get to your question. But Casey and I are going to answer some questions that we have here in the Q&A live. Casey, I'm just going to ask them, and I'll see what questions we can answer here. So first and foremost, we talked a little bit about the MySlice to-do list, but can you make some recommendations of what people should have on hand when they're filling out the FAFSA and the CSS profile? What documents are great to kind of have right in front of them that will make that application process just a little bit easier?
Sure. So you definitely, when you go to fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile, you want to have the parent taxes on hand. So that includes the 1040 and all the different schedules potentially that are along with the 1040, as well as any business taxes. And then if there is student taxes, if as a student you did submit taxes in 2020, you'd want to have those on hand as well. Those are the best. That's the main thing you want to have on to make it easier. The FAFSA does let you use an IRS data retrieval tool and pull the information directly from the IRS into FAFSA, and definitely recommend using that if it's available and if it's working. Sometimes some years it has had trouble technically on the federal side of working, but if it is up and running and you're eligible to use it, definitely use that. For the CSS profile though, that one does not pull automatically, so you would need to have that information on hand. And there is a possibility that we ask for that documentation afterwards. So it is good just to get that all when you do all the FAFSA, kind of keep that all in one place. It's not always necessary. We don't always ask for additional documentation, but there's a thing called verification that the federal government may randomly pull a certain number of files that say they need to be verified. And we need to collect taxes and, like I said, family member listing forms, which is just you as nothing in particular you have to have. You have to simply submit an attestation to people in your household. But it would be mainly the 1040s, W-2s also as well, which is like the wages the parent made. And then also any business taxes and are the main things you want to have on hand.
And so for current seniors who are applying for fall of 2022, they're looking at actually 2020 taxes, correct?
Correct.
Because they're looking at the last full completed tax year, because there are some extensions that could be going on, people still filing 2021 taxes. So don't submit, like Casey said, don't submit those documents unless we specifically request them from you. And again, that will all be in your MySlice to-do list. Thank you, Casey. Another question, Amy has a question about the admissions decisions. Are we need aware or need blind? So when we are reviewing students for admission, we are need aware in terms of we are looking at wanting to make sure that we can fund all of the students that we are admitting to Syracuse University. So we are a need aware institution when you're applying for admission.
And and just to add on to that too, part of this whole process with financial aid and admissions is trying to the admissions office wants to make the most diverse class possible that really has and it's looking at a lot of different metrics, whether that's where you live or what experiences you had in high school, socioeconomic status, diversity metrics, all these different things. We're trying to build the most beneficial environment that's conducive for learning and getting different perspectives while you're in school. So that's just it is one of the pieces of that admission puzzle, but it's really also really to try to enrich students and make sure we have a variety of perspectives and diversity and a good learning atmosphere. So yeah, let's just want to add that.
Thanks, Casey. And then the next question is, do we offer financial aid specific to first generation students? So one thing I want to plug before, unless you
Mhm.
want to jump in after that, is that we are offering a virtual information session for first generation students. It's going to be this Thursday at 7 p.m. We're going to be going over the HEOP program, which is the Higher Education Opportunity Program, the SSS program, and other scholarship services. So that is a session. I think Mike's going to drop a link to how to register for that session into the chat. But if you have some questions about that, please let us know. But in terms of aid specific to first generation students, do you want to talk maybe a little bit, just real briefly about
Mhm.
HEOP and SSSP?
Yeah, so there's a few different programs, like Jessica said, with HEOP and SSS, which are trio programs. They're federal and state um, programs that are specific to certain students that may not have necessarily gotten to Syracuse, but needed just some extra support to get into Syracuse, or our first generation students that again may need some extra support through college. But there's also Posse program that's for students in a certain area though. But that we do have a Posse, some Posse cohort students, and then there's also a Kessler program as well that will be talked about in that first generation student. But otherwise, besides some of those programs that offer some additional support to students, there's no additional scholarship specifically for first gens, and that's because, like I said, Syracuse is already committed to providing 100% of the determined need for the family. So as we're looking at how much a family can afford, we're already providing 100% of that funding. So there's no additional need to provide extra for different students, because we're not what's called in financial aid gapping students, which means, say if you need $27,000, like use an example, and some schools may only provide $15,000 because they may not necessarily be able to afford or have a commitment to fulfilling 100% of that for every student. So maybe they might have something where they give some students more than others, but for us, we're already committed to fulfilling 100% of the determined needs for families. So there's, like I said, no additional need for first gen, but we do have some programs through those different like Posse and HOPSSS that do provide some additional support. And there are different resources on campus besides that do help first gen students. And our new multicultural center on campus is an amazing resource that has all in one space for all different types of students, not just first gen students, but students from different backgrounds and cultures that have really good resources as well. There's a lot of mentorship programs that can help different students who may need it, which as a first gen student, if you feel like you may not know how to navigate university or transition, there's definitely mentorship programs through those multicultural programs that can put you in touch with a peer who may help you through that process a bit better and help you transition to college. So besides financial aid, there's a lot of other resources at the university for first generation students, but financial aid is already providing 100% of that determined need. So there's nothing additional on top of that besides those other specific programs.
Great. Thanks, Casey. So question about when the financial aid package is coming out for early decision one. So the early decision deadline for ED1 was November 15th. So we're in the process of reviewing those applications for admissions now. We are trying to get everyone notified before the end of the year. And in terms of the financial aid package coming out for them, as long as you have completed all of the things on your to-do list within MySlice, and you've completed those applications, your financial aid package should follow your admissions decision. Casey, anything to add in that regard?
Yep, as long as to always double check that to-do list is the main thing, to make sure there's nothing that's outstanding. Because a lot of times you may think you've gotten everything done, and because sometimes even when you go check your to-do list, there may be something there, you submit it, you think you're all good, but then a week later we need more clarification, or we need something else. So just because you at one point had everything done and completed doesn't mean it necessarily is always like that. So again, just always check it at least like once a week. But as long as everything's in, it should come shortly after the mission decision.
Thanks, Casey. So this is a question, and I think it's more than just even sending another student to SU, but the question is, do you offer additional aid for families that are sending a second student to SU?
Mhm.
Example, a sophomore and then a freshman. So maybe talking about
Sure.
how FAFSA and CSS profile kind of calculate those additional students in college?
Definitely. So I did mention briefly that the income and assets, when you're looking at the expected family contribution of a family, it does take into account the number of students in college. So if you have multiple students at SU or any other university, that is part of the equation. And that's because the expected family contribution, for the example that I gave, say that was $50,000. If your family can afford $50,000 for the year, we know that's the maximum what you can afford for any number of students. So it doesn't mean you can afford 50,000 for one and 50,000 for the other. It means that the family can afford 50,000 in total. So if there's multiple students in college, the expected the family contribution gets split up between the different students at college, the different students. So the expected family contribution that actually gets spit out at the end of the FAFSA and the CSS profile is actually a percentage of the original amount. So as an example, just an example, so it's where you normally see this and you'll see the biggest effect is if the family is one in college right now, say that then the expected family contribution is $50,000, and then two go to college at SU, then yeah, that would be split to 25 or some sort of some amount to like close to half of what it was. But it does depend on the type of schools. If it's not SU, if it's a different private school or state school, because some schools cost more or less than Syracuse. And so that goes into account of how much that gets split up, depending on the type of school it is, whether it's a state school or community college. But it does go into the equation, and we do understand that that contribution does need to be split up between multiple students in college. So going back to the question of, is there more aid for students if there's multiple students in college? The answer is kind of. It really depends on what the expected family contribution was beforehand. If it was the contribution that was determined was 200,000 originally, and now there's two in school, there's still no additional aid or need for financial aid. But if when there was one in college, if the contribution was close to or less than the full cost of attendance, then you should see an increase for the student at SU, or and then for the incoming student as well, because now you have two in college and you have to support both students, and we know that the contribution needs to be split between both of them.
Great, thanks, Casey. So there was a little bit of confusion about the New York State TAP. So there's a couple of questions that came in about it. The first one was, should you apply for New York State aid even if you know you're not eligible for TAP? And I do want to make just a quick plug on all types of when you're applying for aid. We see families kind of unnecessarily opt themselves out of review for aid because they're like, I'm not eligible for Pell Grant, so I'm not going to apply for FAFSA, I'm not going to apply for CSS profile, when in fact they may be eligible for different types of funding, because the various applications take into account a number of different things. So my biggest recommendation is don't unnecessarily opt yourself out of these aid options by not filling out the applications. You're basically saying, well, I'm just going to see what happens. We really recommend that you fill out these applications, let the calculations do the work, and then go from there. But in terms of New York State TAP, do you recommend people apply for it if they think they're not eligible? And there was a question about, if you're not a New York State resident, can you apply for TAP?
Sure. So one, I definitely agree with Jessica. You should apply. I personally believe you should apply for FAFSA, CSS, and TAP all the first year, regardless of whether you think you're eligible or not. It never hurts to see. It's not a very time-consuming process. As long as you get that stuff, the taxes and everything in hand, it shouldn't take more than an hour to go through all three. And there's lots of resources and help available if you do get caught up or get confused anywhere. TAP is even shorter than doing FAFSA and CSS profile, so I definitely would go through that. But if, for example, but if you don't meet one of the application requirements, like the question was, if you're not a New York State resident, can you apply for TAP? And if say you're from California, you're a student in California applying for, then yeah, you should not apply for TAP because you're not eligible for TAP. That's one of the only reasons I would say not to. So for New York State residents, yes, you need to be a New York State resident, which means you have to live in the state for at least 12 months. And then yeah, there's other requirements, like you have to be a US citizen or eligible non-citizen, graduate from high school in the US. So on the HESC's website, which was before, it's hesc.ny.gov, that does have the eligibility criteria there, which you can look at if you're not sure if you meet the criteria or not. But if it's just coming down to income or any other things where you think, I don't think I'm eligible, then I would definitely apply at least the first year to apply and see if you're eligible or not before you just discount it.
And when do you recommend New York State residents who are applying to schools in New York, when do you recommend that they fill out the TAP application?
I always just recommend it's with the CSS and FAFSA due at the same time. Like the FAFSA has it says you want to fill your state application right after you complete the FAFSA and do it right then. So whatever the earliest deadline you have for application. I mean, one, do everything as early as possible. Things are every year, October 1st is when FAFSA and CSS is open. So you should definitely try to get on it by as quickly as possible. So now December 5th, in the next few days if you can, but it's always as soon as possible is the answer, and it's always easiest to do it right after the FAFSA.
And Mike just dropped some information on the eligibility criteria for TAP in the chat. So if you have some more questions about that, please click on that link and you can get some more information about that. So Jenna has a question about the non-custodial parent process. So that is different. If you're applying for FAFSA, there is not any questions about the non-custodial parent. But when you're filling out the CSS profile, there is questions about the non-custodial parent. So can you talk maybe a little bit about that process?
So exactly, yeah, the non-custodial parent is if parents are never married or divorced. The biological parents, for Syracuse, we expect both parents to contribute to their students' higher education unless there's an extenuating circumstance, such as there's been no contact since the student was a child, or there's abuse or anything else going on that would obviously remove that parent from the picture. So we collect that information with the CSS profile. It asks for basically two different there'll be a CSS profile for both households, the custodial parent household and non-custodial parent household. But they're both just through the CSS profile. They would log in and complete the CSS profile the same, which is they just enter their income and asset information for both parents on the CSS profile. And if though there is that extenuating circumstance where there's been extended, many years with no contact or any other situations such as abuse, then we do have an appeal form to remove the non-custodial parent from the equation, and you would just contact our office and we can add that waiver appeal form to your to-do list, and that'll be looked at by a committee. Once it's submitted, it asks for some third-party information, some other basic questions, and a letter from the parent or student. And then if that's approved, we wouldn't need it, but if that appeal is denied, we would still need the non-custodial parent information. But in general, though, the non-custodial parent and the custodial parent's information is considered the same. That first year, we're looking at the income and assets, and they both have a contribution that would be added along with the student contribution, if there is one, to come up with a full family contribution for the purposes of Syracuse financial aid.
All right, thanks, Casey. And Mike or Kate, if you could drop the links for the ways to email the financial aid office into the chat, I would definitely appreciate it. Joel has a question that I'll answer about as a veteran who served during 9/11, does that make your child qualified to receive veteran benefits at SU? If you are still currently serving, then yes, but if you have already retired from the military, you had to have transferred your post 9/11 GI Bill benefits to your student prior to your retirement. Generally, it's about 4 years prior to retirement, you have to transfer that benefit to your student. If you haven't done that, then unfortunately you cannot use that post 9/11 GI Bill funding for your student. If you're still serving on active duty, you called yourself a veteran, so I don't think you are, but if you are currently serving on active duty, you still can receive the post 9/11 GI Bill and yellow ribbon funding for a dependent who's attending SU. But again, if you have questions about eligibility for that, those programs, our Office of Veteran Success is your main resource for those questions about eligibility. Again, it's just veterans, plural, at syr.edu. I have some questions about, Casey, there's some questions about the payment plan and how, so say that they want to do kind of a monthly payment process. Can you talk a little bit about how that works with the Bursar's office?
Sure. So there's an option each semester to set up a payment plan. This in general, once that, so going back again to my $50,000 contribution that a family can afford, if that's what it comes up as, that would mean $25,000 a semester, which obviously not every family has 25,000. Even if they can afford $50,000 based on the equation, doesn't mean they have $25,000 a semester liquid, ready to pay at the beginning of the semester. So there is a payment plan that you can pay over 5 or 6 months of the semester, a monthly amount. To break it up over the semester, there is a $75 fee to set the monthly payment plan up in order to do that. So usually families would do as much as possible in the payment plan before they would take out any additional plus loans or private loans. So that's, again, we want to limit loans should be the last dollar in to try to take out as little amount of loans as possible. So try to basically try to determine how much of the payment per month that the family can afford before taking out any loans to do in combination to fill the remaining to pay any of the remaining balance of the bill. But it is through the Bursar's office. There's information on it online. If you just typed in like payment plan Syracuse University, will give more of the guidelines and how it works and how it's set up. But that is an option.
And I don't know if you know off the top of your head, Casey, about there's some questions. There was a question about other states' prepaid plans, but I'm thinking they're probably talking somewhat in the realm of the 529 plan for education. I don't know if I'm not familiar with other states' prepaid plans, but I do know about 529s. Could you maybe maybe drop a little bit of information on that?
Yeah, I mean, any kind of, I mean, the Bursars will take any money that you'll give them. So whether that's coming, yeah. So if there's a prepaid plan for tuition and dorm that is able to be used at schools outside of Florida, for this example, they're saying there's one from Florida's a prepaid plan. Then I'm sure the I don't know specifically because I don't work at the Bursar's office, but I'm sure that they are familiar with it and know how to accept that program. It doesn't come through the financial aid office, but also for 529 plans as well. The Bursar's office does work with 529 plans to make sure those payments come in and are added as well to in conjunction with financial aid if needed to. So yeah, any kind of plan that is eligible to be used at Syracuse, the Bursars, I'm sure will find a way to make use of it.
Yeah, and I just dropped, if you have questions specific to that Florida plan, you can email our Bursar's office at bursar@syr.edu for some more specific questions. I do want to just thank, first and foremost, I want to thank Casey for just your wealth of knowledge regarding financial aid. It's extremely helpful. I know this process is not easy for everyone because everyone's financial situation is just slightly different, which makes it hard to give really general information that really is specific to certain people. So I really appreciate your wealth of information. I want to thank everyone who took the time out of their day to learn a little bit more about our financial aid process. Thank Mike and Kate in the background for just furiously answering all of your amazing questions. We got so many great questions today. So thank you all for taking the time out of your day. Again, Mike dropped some information for links on how to contact the financial financial aid office. You can also contact admissions at orange@syr.edu. So if you do have questions about the admissions process, please feel free to reach out to us. But again, I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to learn a little bit more about Syracuse University, learn a little bit more about our financial aid processes and our wonderful financial aid officers who make all of this possible. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. And we always say here in Syracuse, and I always love to say, is go Orange. And have a great evening, everyone. Good night.